Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my talk. We've got the kind of snappy title of Leaping from Concept to Commercialisation for Entrepreneurs and Developers. Essentially, kind of what I want to get out over the next sort of 45 minutes or so is what sort of things you guys can take into consideration when it kind of comes up with coming up for concepts for applications, and also what sort of things you guys might actually find when you're actually talking to organisations about sort of trying to sell your apps or kind of generate revenue for it. To paraphrase the immortal words of Del Boy Trotter, this time after 45 minutes, we're all going to be millionaires. My name is Tom Harrison. I work for BSI, the British Standards Institution. So I'm actually based here in this office in Milton Keynes. So it's very weird for me to be here on a Saturday. I never actually realised we could just rent this place out at the weekend. So I'm sort of thinking we could fill the atrium up with a ball pit and sort of run a sideline in kids' birthday parties. But my actual day-to-day job that I do sort of Monday to Friday is actually going out and working with industry, so large organisations, small organisations, trade associations and whatnot. Just come up with kind of solutions for the problems that they're facing, streamline things, make life a lot more easier for everybody, actually kind of reduce duplication and sort of waste across the industry. When we sort of think about some of like the most commercially sort of successful apps, so there are a few that sort of instantly sort of jump to mind, like the big disruptors like your Netflix, your Ubers, Airbnbs, Just Eat, that sort of stuff. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Firstly, they are massively successful and sort of very worthwhile and quite successful organisations. And the second one is that we've actually probably directly used these sort of apps or services ourselves on a day-to-day business. In sort of industry, what we would call to these kind of organisations, we'd call them B2C organisations or business to consumer. So what that essentially means is their target market and their audience. It's not organisations, it's individuals like me and you. So, the contract, on Uber, I'm down as, just Thomas Harrison, I'm not down as a company. Netflix, for example, is under the name of my housemate, who left 3 years ago and hasn't changed the password. But, it's all us as individuals, it's not us as organisations. But when we actually sort of take a look at kind of like the app ecosystem kind of holistically, and we take a look at the whole thing, we sort of look at unicorns, so those tech industries that when sort of started up and actually got a market valuation of at least £1 billion sort of euro pounds. But we actually start seeing something slightly different. So whilst we've got 12 of the 27 unicorns that are based in the EU are those B2C business to consumer organisations, actually 15 of them are either in the B2B, which is business to business space, or are actually banks. And actually, there's an argument that can be made that banks, they do they work directly with consumers, but actually the interactions they have with kind of us as customers, it tends to be more contractually based. They're much more sort of overseen by a regulatory authority. So their methods of interaction and operating are actually much similar to an organisation that actually sells directly to other organisations. So if we're coming up with like an idea for a B2C concept, the ability to get inspiration is actually quite easy for us. We spend our daily walking lives. You can go outside, you can see a problem that you might face, and actually just come up with a solution for it. Booking a taxi is rubbish, renting DVDs are rubbish. Let's actually come up with something that's a bit easier. But that's, as I said before, only about half the industry. So how can we actually come up with concepts and ideas for actually selling directly to other organisations, for businesses that might make their lives easier? Now, obviously, we've all got a little bit of kind of business background ourselves, I'd imagine, from working in organisations. But you don't want to be limited directly to sort of your own industry experience, because obviously you want to sort of take advantage of what else is out there in the industry. And there's lots of different ways in which you can sort of go out there and sort of find information about what sort of gaps in the market there might be that could be plugged in with your services or solutions that you might be able to offer. It's a lot easier to create something people want than it is to create something and find out if they want it. So if you know there's a problem out there and you know there's a solution out there, you can create something to plug that gap. If you create something alone without any sort of outside external influencing, the ability, your success in actually being able to sort of market that and actually get people sort of buy into it is pretty limited. We said there's 27 EU unicorns out there. Every year there's about 2.3 million apps developed, so we know the success rate's actually pretty low. But if you know there's a problem and you know that you can provide a solution before you even start developing, then that's a way you can actually make life a lot easier for everyone. So one of the big things that's occurring at the moment is the move towards what we would call smart cities. So there's no real sort of agreed upon definition of what smart city actually is. A lot of people start to think, it's smart light street lights that turn on and off at sort of set times, and that's a component of it. But what really most people would sort of agree on is a smart city is a city that uses technology to solve the problems that its citizens face, or to kind of help drive the objectives of the democratically elected sort of runners of the city, whether it's a council, a mayor, a government, something like that. And there are a few sort of pilot smart cities that are leading the way globally. In the UK, we're here in Milton Keynes, which is one of the most pioneering smart cities in the UK. But probably one that's leading the way at the moment is Bristol. So Bristol has a huge amount of open data sets that are available for anyone to gain access to, and actually be able to use that data to sort of come up with products, solutions, different ways of doing things. So it's data on where bus stops are located, where car parks are located, hospital occupancy rates. There's a massive amount of stuff out there. But what they also do is they have published a report about where they want the city to be going to. So actually, if you've got access to the data, and then also you've got the objectives that the city are sort of highlighted as being where it wants to take itself, then actually that's a really good opportunity for you guys to actually be able to create a solution for it. So for example, Bristol has got it's got massive levels of disparity just over certain you can travel sort of 8 miles or so across the city, and you can see the sort of the university attendance rates almost drop by 2/3. Like there's massive levels of disparity across the city. So if there's something that you could do to kind of help solve that, that's instantly something that's going to be attractive of an interest to the city. London's got a huge amount of people are very interested in sort of being able to launch their services in London, but London aren't actually that interested in a lot of things. There's a lot of people banging on the doors of London saying, hey, we're going to be the next Uber. But London already has an Uber. What their concerns are actually the transportation and the mobility on the outer boroughs, on the outside. And that's not commercially viable under some of the business models. So if you could come up with a solution that might help those people, that's actually much more interest to them, and much more likely to be able to get a foot in the door and talk to them. Healthcare, likewise, there's a huge amount of discussion at the moment about adult social care. So actually, how can we provide solutions to people outside of hospitals, outside of GPs? How can we sort of take that burden kind of off the emergency services and actually be able to sort of utilise technology in a way that we could actually sort of help people? There's trials ongoing at the moment with using things like Alexas and Google Homes to actually sort of be able to sort of reduce the impacts and effects of loneliness in the elderly. You can actually simply be able to talk to a system and have it respond to you. It kind of gives that little bit of dopamine that would otherwise be missing from just going on a web browser and sort of asking a question about when the bins are being collected, when the GP surgery's opening hours are. So the government have published policies and strategies about where they want to be taking this stuff going forward. And again, these sorts of things, they're published fairly regularly. This is quite an old one, but it's sort of set where the country wants to be for 2020. That's a really good place to actually sort of get inspiration and ideas for where you can actually sort of be able to take things. But of course, you don't necessarily have to be starting from scratch. So if you've already got something up and running, you might not necessarily want to throw everything out and start a brand new idea. But actually, if you sort of approach people who might be sitting in sort of systems adjacent to the areas you're working in, you could come up with some new business opportunities. So Transport for London, they have a whole digital team. And actually, one of the problems that TfL was facing, I think it was the Blackwall Tunnel. It was a significant pinch point in London. Where if there was any sort of breakdown or traffic incident in the tunnel, it could lead to some massive tailbacks sort of miles down the road. So TfL estimated it was costing them around about £7 million a year in lost productivity simply from breakdowns in this one tunnel. So they did a bit of data analytics, and they found out that whilst it was breakdowns that were the main reason behind the delays, Actually, the main reason for breakdowns was people running out of fuel. It's a long tunnel, so once you're sort of halfway down, there's no ability to kind of turn off or find another petrol station. So what they did was they actually purchased advertising space on Waze. So if anyone was going to be directed through the tunnel, it just simply popped up with a little advert. And it said, don't get stuck, make sure you've got enough petrol to actually make your way through the tunnel. And what they were able to find out was that off the back of these adverts, 364 people diverted their journey and went to a petrol station before going through the tunnel. So that's 364 possible removes of delays. It's a great opportunity for actually streamlining stuff and making life a lot easier. But that didn't involve any sort of specific changes. It's just opening eyes to a new customer who you probably previously wouldn't have considered as actually being a potential target for an application. So if that's kind of a rough taster of the sorts of people you can be talking to, they're going to be asking different questions than what sort of the general public's going to be asking for when they sort of look to download an app from an app store. They're going to be much more concerned with some of the more finer details. And two of the main things they're going to be concerned on are information security and privacy. So you might sort of be thinking those two things are pretty much the same. Obviously we don't want our data sort of getting out there, but actually whilst they're very closely related, they are actually two separate disciplines. So information security is concerned about the safeguarding of the confidentiality, integrity and availability of written, spoken and computer information. So I'll focus on the back half of that sentence first, because this is the sort of the bit that most people sort of tend to gloss over, is written, spoken and computer information. Whenever we sort of think about information technology, information security, we instantly jump to information technology. We think about our laptops, our phones, our servers, that sort of stuff. But actually, the written and spoken information is just as important. So we're heading into the Christmas period. And actually one of the things that I always find personally quite interesting is whenever I'm actually going out and doing my Christmas shopping, you're obviously walking down the street, sort of 5, 6 o'clock or so, it's starting to get nice and dark outside. There'll usually be some people doing some late nights, working on some plans for the next year's business. So you've obviously stood outside in the pitch blackness, and there's an office building which is lit up ironically like a Christmas tree, and 9 times out of 10 you'll be able to see directly into the windows and see what exactly everyone is working for. So next time you're out doing your Christmas shopping, have a look through some of the windows and just see how many times you can see the phrase 2020 strategic plan written on the wall, and just ask yourself, I wonder how much information that will be worth to that company's competitors. So it's something that's to keep in mind is actually, we're looking at the computer security, our firewalls, our passwords, etc. But actually the physical stuff is just as important. But when it comes to the first half, which is the confidentiality, the integrity and the availability of information, that's just as important. And we instantly jump towards confidentiality when we think about information security. So obviously we don't want people who shouldn't be having access to this data having access to this data. So whether it's bad operators, cyber criminals, foreign organisations, or whether it's just legitimate users who can get access to other people's accounts that they shouldn't have access to by accident. But there's actually 2 other components of information security, which is the integrity and the availability of information. Obviously, when we talk about integrity, that's when we look at things like our data backups. If we're only one mistake away from losing 12 months of data, that's obviously not a sustainable business to be operating in. And actually, availability. If we're running an organisation that requires access to data 24/7, by minute, second-by-second basis. And what we can't do is we can't take our system offline for 2 days just to be able to create backups. It needs to be available, it needs to be accessible. And so you need all 3 equally balanced, depending on what sort of organisation you're doing, what risk level you're facing, and actually just be able to make sure that you've got sort of a robust system in place. Privacy, we could spend a good week just talking about privacy, so I won't drone on too much. But instead, some of the main changes we're looking at the moment really can be boiled down to consent. I'm sure we all remember, was it last year, the odd 20-odd emails you'd get per day from organisations saying, we've updated our privacy policy. And that was mostly based off the back of you were on someone's marketing database that you hadn't actually consented to be on. So now they were changing their policy just to sort of be able to reflect that. And consent really is, there's a big trend in sort of applications where you might be delivering a service to an end customer, and you might be doing it for free, but the actual commercialised output, the way that the sort of the application or the business makes money, is something that might not be related to the actual service that's being offered at all. It could be the actual processing of the inputs of that data and actually producing it in a method that could be of value to another organisation. Now, that's fine, but it depends on whether or not the people who are using your application actually know that's what you're doing with the data. So say, for example, if you were creating like a sports app that you could follow your favourite football team, hockey team, basketball team, whatever, and you could get the latest scores, fixtures and transfer news sent straight to your phone. That's great. That's obviously going to be a huge interest to people who follow that team. But actually, the commercialisation options, you could sell some advertising space, maybe have some referral links for merchandise, that sort of stuff. But it's not huge, it's not enormous. But if people are downloading it onto their phone, you've then got access to maybe their location data, their microphones, and actually then what else could we do with that access? So, if we know where people are, we know what they're listening to, would it be possible for us to be able to listen out for the audio commentary of the match they're looking for? And if we know exactly where they're watching that match, could we then cross-reference that with a database of people who are actually licensed to show that match? Because if we find that they're listening to a match in a big room full of people and that place doesn't have a license to show that match, all of a sudden it's like, hang on, that could be an idea. We could send that information off to the sports broadcasters who are paying billions and billions of pounds or euros to get this. And actually that's really valuable. Sounds theoretical. It's also very illegal. So La Liga did exactly that. Their football app in Spain was actually spying on every single person who installed it. So they knew that people wouldn't consent, especially the people who were actually watching illegal streams, they wouldn't consent to be a spying platform for the league. But they did it anyway. And what this ended up with was a £280,000 fine for breaking the consent and the privacy of everyone who downloaded that app. So, if you're not getting the consent from people and they don't have the understanding of what your application's doing, that can lead you in some hot water. And the people who are going to be purchasing your services, they want to know exactly what they're getting themselves in for. So all of this is pretty much based off the back of GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. So this came to force last year, possibly. And what it really gave us was some definitions of what consent and privacy actually look like. So you've probably seen a subtle change of when you're registering for something now. It'll say tick box if you want to receive marketing material. 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been tick box here if you don't want to receive marketing material. We're now having to give explicitly our consent for when we're actually signing up for stuff. Probably one of the bigger things is it did actually also give us the levels of fines. So what we're actually going to be sort of expecting to receive as an organisation if we do break these laws. Previously, the maximum fine was about £50,000. We're now sort of looking upwards of sort of 10 million or so. And this is applicable for all EU citizens' data, and it's written into UK law. So regardless of what happens with Brexit and whatnot, this is still something that we need to be considering when processing UK citizens' data, but also anyone who sort of might be outside of the UK and in the EU. So, this is from the Digital Health and Social Care. They're saying it's critical that we maintain public trust in how we hold, share and use data. Clear and mandated standards, guidance and frameworks for this will underpin the delivery of the best services and outcomes that meet user need. So, people are saying out there, look, we've got these problems, these are the things we need to be considering. So we're actually going to be making sure that anyone we are working with is actually paying attention and can understand and demonstrate these actual requirements. So, where does BSI come in to kind of all this, and sort of how does it affect what we do on a daily basis? So I'm sure as you're probably all thinking, ideally I'd like to have more than one customer, but then if you've got more than one customer asking you to demonstrate, how do you keep things secure, how do you keep your privacy maintained, that's a lot of sort of requirements and responses that you're going to have to be writing. It's not going to be very efficient or effective for your organisation to be having to do that for every single organisation who's obviously showing an interest, or you want to be able to sell your applications or services to. And this isn't really a new problem. So this was sort of one of the first pieces of disruptive technology. So this is a tram from back in 1901. So it was one of the first mass transit pieces of technology that ever existed. So previously the only way to get around was you either walked or you, if you could afford it, you took a horse. But the trams were actually enabled large amounts of people to move very quickly from one end of the city to the other. It's very efficient, it's much more cost effective than having hundreds and if not thousands of horses traipsing down the road. And it was great. And the tram manufacturers were some of the sort of the most powerful, fastest growing and profitable companies of their day. But then one of them came up with a brilliant idea, which is, well, actually, if we're designing the trams, what if we also design the track? Because what we could then do is we could design and lay a track that only our trams could run on. So what that would mean is that then every time someone needs to buy a new tram or a replacement tram, they'd have to come to us. There's no real alternative. We could kind of cut our competition out. And it was a great idea until every single tram operator came up with exactly the same idea. And then what that led to was 100 different types of tram track laid up and down the UK. And you couldn't actually take a tram from one side of the city to the other because you have to keep getting off and on and so on. And it was a very inefficient and very wasteful time. So some BSI was convened. So the very first standard we wrote was on standardising the widthness or gauge of tram tracks, and we got it down from 100 or so different tram tracks down to 3. So what this meant was everyone was kind of working to the same level playing field. It made mass production much more efficient, much more cost effective. Replacement parts could be swapped in and out. It just generally led to a streamlining of everything, really. So what you might be thinking is, okay, that's a problem from 118 odd years ago. So surely we can't be facing the same problems today. So I'll ask the question: does anyone ever remember saying the phrase, "Does anyone have a Sony Ericsson phone charger?" Yeah, I had a Sony Ericsson as well. And going to a house party and just sort of saying, "Well, does anyone have any way I can charge my phone?" It was a nightmare. People say, "Oh no, I've got a Nokia, I've got an Apple, it just didn't work." And what we ended up with was situations like this, really, where you'd have these massive problems. It was so inefficient. And this is a real product, by the way. This isn't actually a Photoshop. You can buy these off eBay. I wouldn't recommend it because that looks like one of those dangerous things from an electrical safety perspective I've ever seen. But we're still facing these problems of people just keep asking for their own specific requirements. No one's really agreeing on everything. So actually, when we do start to agree on things like, what does a charging port on a mobile phone look like, it does make life a lot easier for everybody. And actually, sort of speaking along the lines of sort of electrical safety, in 1903 we issued the first ever BSI kite mark. So you might have seen this kind of on drains, manhole covers, or plug sockets, and so on. It's made of 3 components, so it's B, S, and the V, which is British Standards Verified. So what this means is a product or service has actually undergone testing against a recognised standard or a recognised way of doing something, and it's exceeded what we would call best practice. So essentially a product with that on is going to do what you'd expect it to do. In 1929 we were incorporated under Royal Charter, so we're a not-for-profit distributing organisation. Anything we do make does get invested back into our business. And more recently, the stuff we have been working on are things like guidance on robot ethics and the use of AI, digitisation of the built environment, so this is building information modelling. How do we sort of create 3D models and visualisations of things before we actually go to the construction phase? And probably more applicable for today is actually sort of testing of applications. So what standards do things need to be created to for them to be safe and secure for people to use? So routes to market. So we know sort of roughly what areas people are interested in when they're talking about using our services, but what specifically are they going to be asking for? So the good news is the market has been much more streamlined now, so you're not going to get asked for hundreds and hundreds of pages of specific requirements. What you'll most likely start to see is kind of at least one of the 4 sort of things I've just put up on the back there. So ISO 27001 It's the world's most commonly used information security standard. Cyber Essentials is a UK-based scheme, which is looking more at the kind of like the basic essential outer perimeter security requirements of an organisation. GDPR obviously has its own set of rules and things that need to be taken into consideration. And then we've also got things like the OWASP series of standard for sort of security and applications. So I'll start with Cyber Essentials, as that's probably going to be the one that you'll get most frequently. It's applicable for organisations of any size. It's predominantly used for sort of smaller businesses who might be tendering for work. And it was actually set up by GCHQ based off something they call the sort of 10 steps to cyber security. And what they kind of came to the realisation was that whilst all these sort of data breaches and hacks were occurring, the ways that they were actually occurring were pretty common. So it was, people not updating passwords, people not updating software to sort of the most recent versions. So I was Ian Lovan, who's a former director, who said 80% of threats to government systems could be dealt with through good information assurance practice. So this 80%, these are the the kids in the bedroom who sort of downloaded something off the internet and are just sort of using it, and as many sort of databases and IP addresses as they can get their hands on, just to see if anything's actually going to work. These aren't sort of the sort of like the Russian or the North Korean hacking groups. The vast majority of issues people are facing are actually just this real basic stuff that needs to get solved. So Cyber Essentials, it's based off of sort of the 10 steps of cybersecurity. I won't go through all of these in too much detail. But what it's really looking at is the perimeter security of an organisation. So have you got firewalls in place? Have you got those software patches updated and installed? And actually what can be done is organisations like BSI or others can actually run tests on the organisation on an annual basis, and assuming all these pieces are in place, certification can be issued. And what it does mean is that if you are sort of going to organisations to try and demonstrate your credibility as a supplier, that's actually where you can utilise these certifications, just to be able to answer a few more of their questions and be able to get that sort of foot through the door. ISO 27001. So there are some key features of the ISO standards. I probably glossed over it a little bit. But at BSI, we don't actually write standards. It's a bit of a misconception. Our area of expertise is actually getting people around the room to agree on what best practice looks like. So industry comes to us and says, we've got a need for a standard, we've got a need for an information security standard. And then what we can do is we'll get trade associations, small businesses, large businesses, government, regulators, we'll get them all around the table to actually get people to agree. These are the things we want to see from services or products that we're buying, and actually here's the routes in which organisations can actually achieve those sort of levels. So it's organisations can certify against them with a certification body, and these standards are actually updated on a pretty regular basis. So the first information security standard was actually published back in 1995. So that was a standard called BS 7799. So that was the precursor to ISO 27001. So it's something we're quite proud of here at BSI. Is actually the majority of these system standards that are actually in use today originated here in the UK. It's actually based off sort of UK best practice. So the most of the DNA for ISO 27001 you can actually sort of find in the original document. And this is what's called the model for continuous improvement. So it's based off kind of 4 key principles, which is plan, do, check, and act. So as organisations, we're really good at coming up with plans, and most of us are actually pretty good at doing them. Where we sort of tend to fall down is actually checking to make sure that we actually did what we originally said we were going to do in those plans. So what this cycle actually provides us with is an ability to sort of take our plans, check that we've actually executed them in a way, and then take those learnings and actually be able to put them back into the business when we're coming up with our plans. So what this means is, especially from an information security perspective, we're not going to be sort of sliding backwards. Once we've set a level which we're going to attain, we're going to be maintaining that going forward, and if not, actually improving it and developing. And these are just some of the controls that you can sort of see in place. things like the physical access control, firewalls, passwords, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. So there is a standard available for a privacy information management system. So these are the requirements for GDPR. So what you might actually start to see is people referencing this if you're holding large amounts of data. So under the GDPR, you can't be a data processor or a data controller. So people are actually outsourcing a lot of data to you. So for example, if you've created an HR service system, obviously they're going to be inputting it on their side, but then it might be being stored on your servers. So what ISO 27701 would do is actually would provide you guys with sort of a set of processes to actually kind of follow, just to be able to make sure that you're taking into consideration everything you need to do under a GDPR perspective. The Secure Digital Transactions Kite Mark is based off the OWASP series of standards. So actually the very first organisation to receive a Kite Mark was the Barclays Ping It app. So we actually worked with them to actually conduct penetration testing of the actual application itself, make sure that the sort of data centres where everything's being stored are all being stored in a manner that's kind of compliant with ISO 27001. And what we were able to do was actually issue them with the Secure Digital Transactions Kite Mark, which just means that anyone who's sort of using it knows full well that actually the data they're inputting, financial, personal, is actually going to be stored and maintained in a reasonable manner. Okay, so what support is available? I can appreciate that probably all sounds very complex and technical and a bit hefty, and well, actually, unfortunately, it kind of is. But the good news is you're not actually alone in undergoing or kind of undergoing these processes. There's lots of organisations who are out there who can actually sort of provide support. So, come on the left-hand side, depending on sort of where you are as an organisation, there are accelerators up and down the country. So NatWest have some. I think we had possibly NatWest in this morning, or someone else. We've got things like Enterprise Nation, Entrepreneurial Spark. They're great for people who might sort of be in the first 8 weeks of sort of setting up an organisation. But if you've sort of reached the level where actually you've got your concept, you've got your product launched, and you want to sort of take it to the next step, there are actually growth hubs started up and down the country. That's obviously just the map for England. There are alternatives for Wales and Scotland. But the regional growth hubs can put you in touch with funding providers, so people who can actually be able to give you guys cash to actually be able to expand and grow the businesses, bring in outside support to be able to help kind of reach some of the solutions to some of the problems you might be facing, or actually kind of be able to make introductions to some nationwide schemes. There's obviously some of the bigger nationwide bodies like Tech UK and UKR&I, who previously Innovate UK. So if you're actually looking for sort of more kind of specific support, how can you make introductions to specific government departments, larger organisations, those bodies can be great to actually join up with. They've all got sort of SME programs for kind of facilitating and growing organisations. We do also do a lot of training courses covering off a lot of these topics. So I think we do have a discount for some of the training for anybody who attends today. So if obviously that's of any interest, please do let us know. And then I think that's it. So I can appreciate that was heavy, and I probably covered off about 3 days worth of stuff in less than 45 minutes. So I'll kind of open out if anyone's got any questions or if anyone wants to kind of talk afterwards. I'll preempt the first question, and the answer is 6'7". Yes, does anyone have anything? No. No? Cool. All right. I guess thank you very much.